One of the most significant factors that contributes to the emotional impact of a melody is if it uses a major scale or a minor scale. This carries over to distinct sound qualities that differentiate certain musical genres from others. Like many other forces in the universe, music has both a light side and a dark side. Comedy and tragedy. Understanding the difference between major and minor scales gives you the power to know which side to use. Before we dive in though, it's no secret that there are different types of guitars out there. And since we're trying to understand different types of scales, I want to throw in a bonus and give you a chance to figure out which type of guitar is best for you. All you have to do is click the link in the description of this video, or you can take the free quiz at zachsharguitar.com. And in just 60 seconds, your personalized score will tell you which type of guitar is best for you based on your unique responses. All right, let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes. So to start this comparison, we're going to begin with major scales. And major scales have a brighter sound to them, and they're associated with the emotion of happiness. So when we're talking about major scales and playing them, we want to keep happiness and brightness in mind. And we often hear major scales used in genres such as pop music, country music, and a lot of classical music, just to name a few. Although there is some overlap, and just because those are scales that are common in those genres, it doesn't mean that those genres use major scales exclusively. So major scales come in a few different varieties, but we're going to start with talking about diatonic major scales. And when I say diatonic, it means a scale of 7 different notes. And with that in mind, the key note in a diatonic scale that tells you whether or not a scale is a major scale or a minor scale is the third. So let's take the E major scale, for example, okay? We start on the root, that's going to be our 1. We go to our second note. It's a major second. And here is where we find out that it's a major scale because it's a major third. And to add to that, the major third is 2 whole steps away from the root, okay? So in this case, that's the difference between the 7th fret on the A string and the 11th fret on that same string. You can already tell it sounds pretty happy, right, when you listen to it. So diatonic scales aside, there's also a type of scale called a pentatonic scale. And the whole penta prefix tells us that it's 5 notes, 5 different pitches. So the same thing happens to apply with the major pentatonic scale, okay? So we're going to start out in E for this, okay? So here's what the scale sounds like. And the major pentatonic scale in particular is very common in country music. And even though there are some notes missing because the pentatonic scale is based around a diatonic scale, we still have that major third in there that tells us it's a happier sounding pentatonic scale. So now we're on to the dark side, okay? These are the minor scales. And as I just alluded to, they are darker sounding. They are considered to have a darker, sad sound to them, usually. And minor scales are pretty common in rock music, heavy metal music, and blues. And we also see a lot of minor scales in classical music, as well as other genres. So we're going to use E as our starting point again for this, okay? So it starts out the same way on E. And a traditional minor scale has a major second, as we see in a traditional major scale. So we're going to do one of those. And then here's where it's different. Instead of the third being 2 whole steps away from the root, it's only going to be 1.5 steps away. could just hear how haunting that is already, right? So again, like we saw in the major scales, what I just showed you just there, that minor scale, is considered a diatonic scale as well because there are 7 different pitches in it. And just like how there's a minor diatonic scale, there's also a minor pentatonic scale, okay? And for those of you who don't know, I just want to add that the minor pentatonic scale is super common in rock music and similar genres. So I'll show you what that sounds like. Again, we're going to use E. And so what can be kind of confusing about this is that the minor third is not the third note played in a minor pentatonic scale. It's actually the second. But we have to keep the interval in mind. Just because it's the second note played in sequence, it doesn't mean it's the second of the scale. Again, pentatonic scale, but based on a diatonic scale. So the distance between that E note and the G note is 1.5 steps. So it's the difference between the 7th fret on the A string and the 10th fret on the A string. For being just 1/2 step away from a major third, it makes a tremendous emotional difference versus. So when it comes to the difference between major and minor scales, it all comes down to the third. If the scale has a major third, where the note is 2 whole steps away from the root, or the starting point, then it's safe to say that it's a major scale. But if the scale has a minor third, where the note is 1.5 steps away from the root, or the starting point, then you can tell that it's a minor scale. And this same concept applies to different modes as well as different chords. All it really takes is knowing what type of third you're playing. For example, we're going to go E again. Before I tell me in the comments if you think that was a major chord or a minor chord. Now I'm going to show you the next one. So if you already guessed, the first chord was an E major chord, and the second one was an E minor chord. How'd you do? Did you get it right? So now that we figured out the difference between major scales and minor scales, it would be a really good time for you to take my free quiz and figure out which type of guitar is best for you. It just takes a minute and you'll get a unique result based on your personal preferences. You can find the link for that quiz in the description of this video, or you can also find it at zacksharguitar.com. If you have any thoughts or questions about what was covered in this video today, please feel free to drop a comment and let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Zach with Zack Shar Guitar, and I will see you in the next one.